You knocked on the wrong door tonight, Pops.
Get up. Get up!
On the Turkish railway, Robert sits with a book in hand. Across from him is a family, and at one point, the father excuses himself, leaving his daughter behind. Robert quietly takes note, and later that night, he heads in the same direction. At the bar, he asks for a drink, but the bartender says it's closed, and Robert pretends not to understand. Nearby, the family man from earlier is with a group at a table. He repeats that the bar is closed, but then insists Robert should be served.
Thank you. Welcome. American. Guilty.
This isn't Robert's first time in Turkey, but he isn't here for nostalgia. He makes it clear he's on a mission after a bitter man who kidnapped his own daughter just to spite his American ex. Robert jabs at him, pointing out the abuser's cruelty, then mockingly asks,
Do you think I could find that man in Turkey, or maybe on his way to Turkey?
The man warns that such a person would be dangerous, but before returning to his circle, signaling at his crew to attack, Robert makes it clear he doesn't shy from danger when justice is on the line. He sets his timer, then suddenly splashes his drink in the first goon's face, following with a punch and a smash from a tea jar. A gun comes out, then a knife, but Robert maneuvers through them until only he and the kidnapper remain. Taking a seat opposite the man, timer running, Robert gives him a choice.
Pain that hurts. Pain that alters.
Meanwhile, in Boston, Massachusetts, Grace rushes out of a taxi and into a building to collect her daughter. She's told the State Department knows nothing, and that a stranger dropped the girl at the front desk 45 minutes earlier. Back home, Robert works as a Lyft driver. Sam has been in his car enough times that Robert can already guess where he's headed. His next passengers include a nervous young man rehearsing a pitch, a young woman celebrating her college admission, and by nightfall, a soldier on his way to Iraq for his first tour. Robert promises to be his driver when he returns. On his time off, Robert chats with his neighbor Fatima, assuring her he'll attend the upcoming potluck. He still wears his wedding band, even though it's been years since he last shared the apartment with his special someone. In Belgium, a man returns home and meets more than dinner. His wife is terrified and roughed up, and several men materialize, one man shooting her square in the head. They drag him into a chair, and one of the gloved intruders shoves the gun into his hand. Why are you doing this?
I got your name on a piece of paper in my pocket. It's all that matters.
When his 10-year-old son arrives from school, he'll see two corpses, having no idea his father begged before he ate a bullet. Somewhere else, Robert is driving home a group of young and chatty school kids. He then stops at the library to pick up an order he placed the previous week. Grace's kid shares a smile and hello, and Robert responds with a sign to stay mute. The clueless mom comes in and hands him his 100th book, hoping he'll begin a new list soon. She cheerily explains when asked that the store is no longer for sale because circumstances have changed. His latest passenger is a woman named Amy, wincing in pain as she gets into the car. The man who put her in the back seat hands Robert a credit card, avoiding eye contact, and is off. But Robert only gets so far before he decides he can't just take her home. Her attackers are back in a lavish suite when Robert shows up and claims the credit card was declined. The guy behind the door sneers at Daddy's boy before he lets Robert in and hands him a new card to splurge however he likes. He starts to bait, reveals the intern is now at the hospital getting her stomach pumped. He wants whatever dirt they have on her, and the guy looks like he's about to comply until he bolts the door and swings. Robert counters. More men come after him, but he cracks limbs and necks like with brutal precision. When the room is quiet, only Daddy's boy is left cowering on the couch. Robert instructs him to stand up and call 911 to confess his sins.
Daddy's money's not gonna save you this time, you understand?
They don't even know the girl's name, so he reveals it before breaking the boy's fingers on his left hand, expecting a 5-star rating for the ride. By the time he settles in his car, the ratings arrive. On edge, Robert pulls a pistol before entering his apartment. Indoors, he peers before calling out to Susan. She chuckles as she steps out, surprised he knew. He sensed her smell. They fall into a hug before they enjoy dinner, catching up like old pals. The tone gets heavier when conversation shifts to Vivian, Susan trying not to cry. Today's her birthday, and Susan apologizes for showing up at such a moment, but insists Robert needs to go home and make peace. Playing hero won't heal him, no matter how much good he does for strangers.
It's what Vivian would have wanted.
They share a final hug before Susan takes a taxi to the airport, leaving Robert to head the other way. By morning, the courtyard is trashed. Fatima blames kids for the mess as she tries to fix her garden. Robert gets to work scrubbing graffiti off the wall. Miles, a passing art student and resident, asks why he isn't waiting for maintenance. He's more into side hustles than school and offers to paint the wall for $350. It's steep, but Robert respects the initiative. Later, Miles comes back with a better offer, $250. Robert agrees, but only if it's an after-school job. Miles accepts, as long as it's paid in cash. Elsewhere, Susan is back home on an online call with Dave and another officer. Her husband Brian briefly interrupts before heading out, leaving her to her work. She invites Dave to come along with her. Sam shares his story while they overlook the raging sea. He's a Holocaust survivor trying to recover a painting of his sister. They were separated during the war, only 9 when he last saw her. Decades later, in Paris, he happened to see her painting being auctioned. They asked for proof, and now he's got photographic evidence sitting in his lap, excited to show the judge. But a staff member pushes back, saying he tried to help old Sam years ago only to find there was nothing substantial to stand on. Sam is stuck in limbo, though maybe that isn't entirely bad. It keeps him going since he has nothing else left. In D.C., after Brian's book signing, Robert hands Susan an envelope, asking for her help. She mentions she'll be in Brussels the next day, which leads to teasing. She's supposed to be retired, and he's supposed to be dead. Meanwhile, Miles gets to work on the wall, chatting with Fatima as he paints. Robert watches him through the window, checking his watch to make sure it's after school hours, just as they agreed. In Brussels, Susan and Dave arrive at the crime scene with local cops on standby. Blood pools in a plate, and a smear of powder streaks across the table. A window behind the family photos bears a bullet hole, with blood spattered across the pictures. The sight shakes Susan, though she masks it and steps away. On the other hand, Sam is starting to have cold feet. The judge doesn't seem convinced, and Sam isn't sure about his own evidence anymore. Back at his apartment, he digs out the only surviving picture of Magda and hands it to Robert. The portrait was commissioned by their uncle as a gift for her 12th birthday.
My little brother, she'd say, my Sammy, I could never protect her. To lose her twice, I can't imagine.
There's a glimmer of hope when Susan calls with a lead, which she forwards to Robert. As for Calbert's case, he looks clean. Dave hasn't found a motive, and Susan suggests they dig into the wife's background instead. Data from Calbert's hard drive starts to come in, but Susan is already eager to move.
No, we'll talk about it on the plane. I want to get out of here as soon as we can, run some theories by stand.
Alone in the hallway, she's fiddling with the door when 2 men suddenly barge in. One hurls her around like a rag doll, while the other searches her coat. They demand money, but she says she has none. She switches to offense, locking one in a chokehold, but not for long. The second man rams her into the wall, and she barely escapes into another room after smashing a vase across his face. He forces his way in, but she stabs him in the leg. Still, it's 2 against 1, and behind closed doors, the fight grows brutal. Elsewhere, Robert and Miles talk while Miles paints. Robert flips through the young artist's sketchbook, which sparks a backstory. Miles explains that his signature sketch, a boxer, is a tribute to his late brother, who was shot outside a gym over a gym bag. Brian calls and Robert picks, assuming its usual chatter, until he has reason to grow cold and clipped. The change is sharp, and the next thing Miles knows, Robert is striding out without a goodbye, leaving his novel behind. Robert later arrives in D.C., dressed in a suit. While people gather indoors to offer Brian their condolences, Robert sits alone on the steps outside, as if quietly scouting. The grieving husband was told it was a robbery. Strange, because the only jewelry she ever wore was her wedding band. The agency promised they'd do their best, said they were working with Interpol to track down the perpetrator, but none of it fills the hole she left behind. Left alone, Robert goes through Susan's belongings sealed inside a jar. Among them is her phone, which he plugs into his laptop to extract whatever he can. Meanwhile, back in Brussels, in a dingy apartment, 2 men are getting wasted. The music is blaring when they scramble, searching until one of them drags a ringing phone out from under the couch. Neither is sure whose it is, and the moment they answer, boom! Outside, Kovac on lookout watches the blast from a distance. Satisfied, he returns to the waiting car that immediately drives off. Robert sits with the laptop in hand, filled with evidence including footage from the reception and photos of his deceased friend. A knock sounds at the door. It's Miles, holding his book, but when Robert doesn't answer, he quietly leaves it at the doorstep. Robert stays glued to the screen, rewinding the same clip of the elevator, studying who stepped in with Susan and Dave. Out in the park, Dave is jogging when Robert calls to him.
Got fat, Dave,
he says, before the 2 embrace. For Dave, it's like seeing a ghost. The last time he saw Robert was just before an explosion in a lobby. He attended the funeral, grieved deeply for a long time, too. They were partners, and now Dave feels the sting of betrayal that Susan had been the only one who knew Robert was still alive. Their talk circles back to her. Susan had once pulled Dave out of a dark corner, and Robert relates. Strained, he reveals she never pushed her floor number in the elevator, meaning the killers knew her floor. They're gone now, erased in a so-called gas explosion.
At least that's what they're calling
what
it.
do you call it?
Tying up loose ends.
The autopsy report shows a stab wound, too precise to be random. That's when Dave makes his choice. He's all in now, whatever Robert needs. If you have come this far, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Robert is back home, keeping himself stashed indoors, watching through the window. He sees Miles still working on the wall until a van pulls up. The boy immediately drops his paintbrush, greets the men who step out, and follows the gang as they head off together. He then begins scrutinizing the crime scene photos from Calbert's home, taking a seat the way Calbert once did, and picturing himself as the man in that moment. What he visualizes doesn't add up as a murder self-inflicted case, bullet shells and neck angles pointing better to third parties. Dave is at the office when Robert calls with a verdict. Calbert's wife was shot by someone left-handed, while Calbert himself was right-handed. Dave agrees, adding that the powder residue they found at the scene came from latex gloves. The whole thing was staged, and Susan had been close to the truth. Robert promises to call back with more revelations as soon as he can. Though Robert has been holed up inside, consumed by Susan's case, the moment he notices Miles hasn't returned, he grabs a pistol and heads for the school, dropping any thug who tries to block him. Deep in the lair, girls stir chemicals while Miles gets a pep talk from the crew, told he must carry out vengeance for his late brother. Robert storms in with 2 guns drawn and orders Miles to move.
Go, Miles.
The boy obeys, leaving the crew stunned at the intrusion. Out in the hallway, Miles mutters that painting walls won't cut it anymore, so Robert dryly tells him he can make him his first target if killing is really the path he wants to take. Miles freezes, unable to pull the trigger. Robert takes the gun from his hands and turns it back on him, tightening a chokehold while aiming as if ready to do the job himself, asking what Miles sees when he looks at him. His voice cuts sharp.
You don't know what death is. You have no idea what death is.
He tells Miles he's got talent, but now he has to decide what to do with it. The message is clear, though Miles can't grasp why Robert has singled him out for protection. As far as Robert is concerned, they can figure that out together. The next time Miles turns up at Robert's door, he's cleaned up. Robert's in the kitchen, cooking, and quickly slides his pistol out of sight before answering. He keeps that same fatherly toughness, making sure the boy doesn't get too comfortable. Miles notices the place could use a paint job and names his price. Robert agrees on the condition that Miles reads a book of his choosing first. Robert is back on his Lyft runs. His latest passenger says he's heading to his daughter's birthday, but the way they trade quiet, calculating looks through the rear view makes it clear something's off. Robert soon points out they've been driving the opposite way and the man hasn't noticed. That's when the passenger pulls a blade, but Robert jerks the wheel, swerving hard, and the man loses his balance. The man lunges, but Robert elbows him hard, the car swerving into traffic. A blade flashes for his throat, yet Robert twists the arm out of socket and smashes his face with a punch. The man draws a gun with his other hand, but Robert pins it with the accelerator, the first shot ripping through the windshield. The car spins, Robert cracks his jaw again, then shoves the muzzle to his face and fires before steadying the wheel and driving on. It's late evening when he's parked and using the guy's fingerprint to unlock his phone. He sets the car ablaze with the corpse inside. Meanwhile, Dave and his family are being staked out. He's inside with his 2 girls while his wife answers the door. She comes back with Robert, who's shown up unexpectedly. As his wife gets the girls ready for school, the old partners talk, Robert pulling out a phone and admits,
I took this off the guy who tried to kill me yesterday. It's like you said, they're cleaning up. Everybody was looking to the Brussels hit. Nobody's safe. You, your family, nobody. That's military-grade encryption. Take it to your office, run the numbers, and check the names against the passenger manifest in and out of Brussels in the days surrounding the flight. Whoever we're looking for, made calls to that phone.
Dave bops along and Robert smiles before dialing the number he'd picked from the hitman's phone. Dave's phone ringing in response. Now that the truth is out, Robert presses him, asking what changed. Dave explains he went private after the government left them high and dry. By then, good and evil didn't mean much to him anymore, and Susan was simply unlucky. Her work on the Calbert case had brought her too close to figuring him out. So on the day of the supposed robbery, he stepped in himself and ended it with a precise stab wound. Dave tries to water down his actions, brushing aside Robert's righteous tone. He insists he had no choice, that he only did what he had to do to put food on the table, and that he's not alone. Every one of their old comrades is part of this new dynasty. Outside, Robert comes face to face with the rest of them, Dave making it clear he's not walking away alive. Robert pushes back with his own talk of choice, promising that killing them all will be justice for Susan. But when Dave's wife and kids suddenly step out, Robert eases off and instead calls for a lift to the station, teasing he'll catch up with the boys at work. Brian gets a call asking for his wife's favorite piece of clothing. He admits he doesn't think she had one, but he'll bring something anyway. His voice is heavy with grief. Not long after, Rennick and Ari pull up to his place. Brian feels something off and arms himself with a shotgun, creeping toward the stairs. That's when he spots Robert, waiting silently. The intruders are still downstairs. One remains there while the other makes his way up, stepping into a bedroom that looks empty. Robert and Brian are already driving, the silence thick. They end up in a hotel room, and when Brian finally asks, Robert tells him the truth. The men who killed Susan are now after him. It's all about tying loose ends. Miles has started work at Robert's place and calls him to ask for food. The sound of dogs barking puts Robert on edge, and he tells Miles to check the window. From there, Miles sees a man delivering pizza, but out of Miles' sight, the so-called delivery guy pulls a gun from the box. Soon the men reach the stairs, trying to break in. Miles keeps the line open and follows Robert's instructions, heading to the bookshelf. He pulls a book, revealing a hidden button. Pressing it opens a secret door, giving him a way through. While Dave scouts the apartment, Miles panics, unsure of what's happening. Robert steadies him, telling him to stay quiet. Outside, Robert is in his car under the rain, watching everything through surveillance. At first, it seems clear, but Dave's attention shifts to the bookshelf. Robert guides Miles into a hidden compartment, telling him to switch off his phone light. The boy's claustrophobic and afraid they can see him, but Robert reassures him it's a two-way mirror, and only Miles can see out. Still, Dave grows suspicious and points his pistol at the compartment where Miles is curled up. That's when Robert calls, calmly telling Dave he's not home. Dave notices the camera and warns Robert he's picked a bad fight, but Robert baits him to come for him before ending the call. Dave thinks it through. Robert must be heading home. He and Kovac leave, and Miles assumes it's his cue to come out of hiding. He barely makes it to the door before Kovac steps out, and Dave backs him up with a pistol. Robert truly makes it home, but has to bluff his way through with a police barge, lying to get past because the storm has the whole town under evacuation. Dave and his men are right behind, suited up in military gear. Where Robert talked his way through, Dave uses a pistol and pushes past. They begin their search while Robert lies hidden in his car under a cover of turpentine. They slow as they pass Vivienne's former bakery, then stop at the yellow house. Walkie-talkies crackle as they move into formation. Two men sweep the inside while the other two keep watch on the surroundings. Dave notices the rocky watchtower and climbs the steps. From the top, he takes up a sniper's post and scans the area below. Kovac moves in on a sign of movement, while Airy secures the south side from behind a picket fence. The bakery sits abandoned, filled only with the whistle of wind and the groan of old wood. Suddenly, a projector flickers to life, casting a mirage that draws Kovac's fire. The distraction is all Robert needs to strike from below, launching a spear that pins Kovac to the wall. Ari steps in, stunned by Kovac's corpse. He radios Dave, who orders the push toward the ocean. The walls are plastered with Susan's posters, and Ari hesitates just long enough. Robert strikes, two blades flashing too fast to counter, cutting him down in an instant. Resnick fights through the flood of water until he finds Ari bleeding out. He kneels beside him, shouting the report back to Dave. Meanwhile, Robert circles to the corner of the yellow house, then sprints to the parked Jeep. He angles the rearview mirror to catch the watchtower, clips an electricity pylon, and smoke pours out, masking Dave's view and giving Robert cover to move. Resnick spots a blood trail smeared along the yellow wall and concludes Robert is making his way toward the bakery. Inside the bakery, Robert slices open bags of flour and sets a standing fan spinning. Resnick keeps to the corners until Dave's voice orders him inside. Robert fires a shot toward the watchtower, drawing attention, then slips out the bakery door just as Resnick lobs a grenade inside. The blast ignites the flour cloud, and the explosion consumes him.
Just me and you, Dave. Nobody's left.
Not exactly.
Dave isn't accepting defeat yet, citing a contingency plan and baiting Robert to show himself. Inside the trunk, Miles is duct taped and pounding, the bait to force Robert's surrender. If he doesn't give in, the kid dies. Dave has a clean line of sight on the car and his aim set squarely on the trunk. He clips the rearview mirror and taillight with his shots, taunting him, dragging out the seconds until time runs out. Then Robert fires into the tire, jolting the aim just enough for Dave's bullet to shatter the back glass instead of hitting Miles. Robert keeps moving. The wind slams Dave down, but he regains his footing and his gun, screaming into the storm, taunting Robert about failing to save his wife, Susan, and now Miles. Robert appears, knocks him down, and the gun skids away. Dave snatches a knife and jabs Robert's thigh, but Robert counters with a stab of his own before the blade drops. They grapple for control, Dave locking Robert in a chokehold until Robert gouges his eye and drives an elbow to break free, seizing the knife again. Dave doesn't stand a chance after that. Robert drives the same fatal stab Dave once gave Susan. Their eyes lock, Dave's good eye on Robert's cold stare, before Robert plunges the knife into his neck, slicing through and shoving the body onto the rocks for the sea to take. Robert goes back for Miles, who's been shot in the leg. The wound isn't serious, just a bandage to keep it steady. The yellow house is his, and he invites Miles to sit beside him. Miles later returns to school, turning his focus to art. He finished the mural, signing it, left for Fatima to see. Elsewhere, Sam is reunited with Magda, a quiet victory made possible through Robert and Susan's help. Back in his old home, Robert stands at the window, gazing out toward the sea. It's a wrap for this one.